Scene one, Apple, take one.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Film Notes. I'm Shane Borza, and today I'm excited to have Joyce Yoo live at the Casa del Fuego. Fun fact, Joyce is my wife, so we're doing this in-person interview. If you've seen any of the other shows, you know most of them are done over Zoom. But it's a new year, new season, hence the new shirt. One of the things I wanted to get Joyce on was to talk about being a voiceover actor, which is one of the things she does, but also to talk about just production in general, as she's been my producing partner in projects for almost 10 years now, as well as maybe talking about content creation and comedy and improv and all the other things that you've done. So if you could just start off by introducing yourself and maybe talk a little bit about how you got started in just being a creative person.
I'm Joyce Yoo. I was born in the LA area, lived there the longest, probably 20 plus years. So, you know, it's kind of close to all that film industry stuff. Lived in different parts of the country. But the first thing I remember wanting to be when I was really young was an actor. So that was sort of my first dream ever. But growing up, you know, in the 80s and 90s, I didn't see a lot of faces like mine on screen. So it didn't seem like a real possibility to me. I have done pretty much indie stuff because, you know, people were creating things. I had friends, you know, creative friends who, you know, wrote things for me. And so that's a lot of the work that I did. I did some background work on some, you know, mainstream productions and things like that, but that was probably the extent of it. Most of what I've done has been kind of independent. So yeah, I have done a little bit of on-screen acting. I've done some writing, done some production. You know, when you're indie, you wear all the hats, you do all the things, whatever's, you know, craft service, whatever's needed to do. And then I got into voice acting because actually one of your old coworkers was creating a story-based podcast. So this was before that genre kind of exploded. It's so popular now, but back then not a lot of people were doing these story-based podcasts. So I got to do about 5 or 6 voices for that and just had the time of my life. It was so fun. You can be over the top, you know, because all you have is your voice. So you really have to put a lot of character into that. And it didn't matter what I looked like. So I could be cast as a lot of different roles. So I played, you know, as old as I think 60 or 70 with like a New England accent to, you know, young 20s, whatever. So I was able to be so many characters. So I kind of fell in love with it. And that ended up being what I started pursuing more actively. So when we moved to Las Vegas about, 4 years ago, I started attending a local place that does classes, the Voice Actors Studio in Las Vegas. And then I cut my demo and set up my website, and I've been a working voice actor since.
So how is it over time to have had these ideas or interests of like doing the thing change? Does it feel better? Do you like doing a variety of things? Are you wanting to settle more into voiceover? Is that just what you're doing at the moment and you want to pursue other things as well? So talk to me about that evolution over time.
Yeah, you know, I like doing a lot of different things. So I like writing. I like editing. I like, you know, figuring out some of the logistics, doing some of the production. I like performing. So yeah, I think that's what I want to continue to do. And I'm also a content creator, which I kind of fell into by accident. I actually worked in corporate as a social media manager, but I didn't enjoy it. And I didn't see myself as someone who, you know, liked posting regularly on social media. But then I got obsessed with jigsaw puzzles. And so I've been creating content on my jigsaw puzzle Instagram account. And that is actually something that I'm having a lot of fun with. And because I'm doing little comedic sketches or, you know, creating and editing videos, I get to do so many aspects of the process, from writing it to performing in it to editing it. all of it. So I'm really enjoying having my hands in a lot of those creative aspects. And so going forward, I think I'd like to do kind of all those things. And even for that account, I do some, my own voiceover, which I've also written.
One thing that I think trips people up sometimes is how the links in the chain can lead to other things, or it's like the walking up the steps. You need every single step to get to the next step. So when I went to college, I have a literature writing degree, and I didn't do it, quote, anything with it. But when I had people who started doing creative things and they found out I was a writer, they were like, oh, you can help us with scripts. I didn't know how to write scripts, but I knew how to write. So that was a way to get in and then use that as a skill set, even though it was in a way I never thought of initially. So when you talk about, well, I did background and extra work and then this and then that, and then I fell into that, to me, that makes perfect sense because I've experienced that myself. But I think other people sometimes don't understand how those things can work together, or how they can build almost like a portfolio of skill sets in yourself. So talk a little bit about how, as you've gone through these things or fallen into things by accident or on purpose, that it's helped to kind of fill your toolkit, so to speak, and how that might enable you to then go forward or do other things.
Well, I think I'm naturally someone who is interested in and curious about a lot of different things. I like to try different things. I think one of my favorite things is just learning something new. So I've tried lots of different things, or someone has come to me and just said, hey, what, would you be interested in this? And I just kind of went okay, let's give it a go, and have done it. But I think I overall just consider myself a storyteller, and that's often a title that I claim for myself because storytelling happens through so many ways. It's the writing, it's the performing, it is the editing, it is all of that. And Robert Rodriguez, the director, he often says oh, I'm just a creative. I don't consider myself just a director or just a writer. I'm just a creative. And whether that's cooking meals with his kids or whatever, that's a form of creativity. And so I think that's the thing I like to do, is just tell a story or craft a message or figure out how do I help someone understand something or connect with something or whatnot. And so there's so many different ways to do that. And so I think using my voice, using words, using my body and face and all of that, all just kind of is from the same core thing. And yeah, I think I've always struggled to be a specialist, and I've always struggled. People, when people ask, oh, what's your favorite actor? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite band? And I'm so bad at picking the one favorite. I like having sort of a range of things that I like and do and enjoy.
So I want to unpack something you mentioned, because we can all tend to sometimes look at our past and just be like, well, that just happened. And people hear it and they're like, how did that happen? So you mentioned wanting to be creative when you were young. And then you're and then I became a social media person at a company. And then I went to voice acting school. How did that happen? Did you plan for those things to happen? Was it the right place at the right time? How did you go from that interest or idea when you were younger to where you are now?
I think a lot of it was accidental, and a lot of it was through personal connections. So, that acting was the thing I wanted to do when I was younger. And yeah, I did little plays and skits through church groups or local organizations and things like that. And then for a really long time, I did not think of it as being something realistic for me. So I kind of put it aside and tried to find a career. So the first thing that I did out of college was I was a school teacher, and then kind of realized that wasn't for me, and then kind of jumped around to different jobs. I worked as a legal assistant, and then I worked as a recruiter. That was a complete accident. So there's the accident thing again, but I found I kind of had a knack for it. And then after that, I kind of, Great Recession hit, and I had what I called my recession survival job, and that I found through a friend that we were going through our MBA program together. So personal connection, accidents, circumstances, you just kind of go with it. And then from there, I really thought about, what do I want to do? And marketing, I think, that's what I did next. And that's something that appealed to me because there is a creative aspect, there is a storytelling aspect to it. But it pays consistently. And so that's kind of what I went into. And then that sort of part of that was doing social media marketing and whatnot. And I think just, being a millennial and growing up with social media, that kind of became the default, is kind of the older professionals be like, they know what they're doing, let them do the social media kind of thing. And so that's kind of how that happened. But again, and I'm a career coach as well. And so a lot of people have concerns about like, I've done so many different things, or I seem like I'm jumping around. And at the time it felt like that to me too. But I think reflecting back on it, again, every single job that I had something to do with communication and storytelling. Legal assistant, teacher, marketing, it's all about communicating well and getting a message across and telling your story in a way that is compelling and is persuasive, or whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, there's something that draws me to each thing that I've done, and I think that that's still kind of the core of all of it.
One of the jokes in the industry is you can ask 100 different people, how'd you get in the industry? And you're going to get 100 different answers. So there is no one way, and a lot of it is who you know and being in the right place at the right time. When I went to Stunt Academy, one of the things that they taught us is like, you just have to be ready. So if you need to warm up, if you need to stretch out, if you need to practice, if you need to get stronger, if you need to learn the choreography, whatever, because when they say you're up, you have to be ready. Because if you're not, then we're like, well, we'll hire somebody else who is ready. So some of this is that through line, like you said. Mm-hmm. And that's another important aspect for people to sometimes look at. When you mention a career coach, I know you talk to people about this. Like, okay, what's the thing that you have done across your 10 years or 10 jobs or whatever? How can you start to figure that out for yourself? So how did you maybe figure some of that out as you went through these, say, 10, 20 years, whatever it might have been, of like, quote, living your life, that maybe helped you when you did get these opportunities to do more creative work, to kind of show up and say, I do have these skill sets. I recognize that I know how to do this, or that, I can deliver this thing, especially when it comes to like content creation or even just being a voice actor. And a lot of people have imposter syndrome or whatever, and it stands in the way, and they kind of don't allow themselves to do the thing.
Yeah.
So how did you enable yourself or recognize, I have the skill sets and the ability, so yes, I can do the thing for you?
I think it's not getting so literal and stuck on the specific thing of what you've done, and kind of being able to generalize it and translate it in a way to somebody. And it makes me think of, and this is kind of sometimes a joke, is when you go in and you pitch a movie idea, you have to have this short little blurb, like, it's Star Wars underwater, right? Or it's like Rocky with women, or you know what I mean? It has to be like this short little thing. And so in a way, you have to do that a little bit to your own career, in a sense. Like, you have to find the common threads, you have to find the things that people recognize and relate to. And I think part of that is because I am so fascinated in communication and translation, and I grew up bicultural and bilingual, and have visited multiple countries and lived in a lot of different cities in the US, is like knowing how to adapt the way that I speak to other people and in a way that they will understand. So yeah, I think part of it was looking at the story, and noticing the themes. It's almost analyzing the script of your own story or your own life or whatever. And I'm sure if you go to film school or whatnot, a lot of the way that we learn things is by watching a lot of things, and you start to notice patterns emerge. And so in a way, you have to kind of take that vision of your own life and apply that kind of analytical view and see like, oh, what's the through line? What's the storyline here? What's the theme? What are the themes emerging? And I think that's kind of how you're able to translate or communicate what you can do. But again, a lot of it too is those relationships, because I don't know that I would have had a chance to do certain things had I just given somebody my resume, and said, hey, I'd like to do this. I think it's because when you're working in the indie world and it's such a small team and everyone kind of like, whoever can do it, whoever has a body, and so you get the opportunity to do a lot of those things.
We've been kind of zoomed out and talking about some of these things in general, but I want to zoom in a little more. And this is something that's surprising for some people. They'll say like, oh, I want to go to film school. And they go to film school and they're like, so what do you want to do in the industry? And they're like, well, I want to make movies. And like, yeah, but how? Like what part, what genre, what role? And it gets more complicated and very murky very fast. You're like, oh, I want to be a camera person. You're like, okay, well, which one of the like 25 roles on a camera team do you want? You're like, I didn't know there was 25 roles. So when you talk about whether it's content creation or especially like voiceover, there are all these specialties and things I've learned, through your journey of doing it and kind of seeing that peripherally. Talk about how you either learned about some of those things or selected or opted in or out some of that. I know that you have done some projects. You're like, I don't like doing these. So what's the journey, in the zoomed in the details?
One of the things that appealed to me about voiceover is when I started to get into it, it was so much clearer and simpler a path than, say, on-screen acting, because I felt like no matter who was talking, like at a conference or at a class, they all kept saying the same thing: is your first step is take classes. You have to learn how to use your instrument. Voiceover is not you just read off a page or you have a nice voice. There's more to it. And so first you have to hone your skills and be in a good enough place and be working with professionals who can recognize when you're ready. And then all of that is leading up to cutting your demo. And your demo is essentially you read several lines in different ways that show the range of your voice. Actors are familiar, of course, with reels, or stunt people are familiar with having their reel or whatever. And so that then becomes what you kind of submit or send around or, put on your website that demonstrates what you can do. And then you look for work. And you audition. There are certain online marketplaces where you can submit auditions, or you can reach directly out to companies to kind of, try to get on their roster, especially for things like e-learning or like medical or whatnot, where it's kind of like high content. And they need somebody who can do that. That's a way to go. So yeah, through taking all these classes, I explored a lot of different genres. Like, character, animation, video games, etc. E-learning, as I just mentioned. Medical is its own specialization. Audiobooks, there's all kinds. Commercial. And so I got to try a lot of the different genres and get a sense of what felt good to me, what I liked, what I didn't necessarily like. And so, yeah, I felt like the path was super clear. You take classes until, my coaches were like, okay, you're ready for a demo. And then scheduled the demo and, paid for it, had it directed, had it edited. I built my website, posted that on. And then I got on a roster for e-learning, and that's where a lot of my work has come from. So yeah, I think you start with maybe a genre or two that you think will be kind of your bread and butter. And then while you're making money off of that and having it be a viable profession, then you can kind of work on some of these other genres and things. I did do an audiobook. I think it's not really for me because of just, it's a lot of work. It's probably requires the most endurance, the most versatility. Maybe someday I might revisit it, but for me, it's just not personally the most interesting or exciting for me. But I have people that I took classes with where like, that was it. That's all they wanted to do. And that's what they're doing. And they love it. And they're great at it. So you kind of got to find what your niches are.
And again, that's where the practical application meets the road, so to
Yeah.
speak. Like, you go to film school and like learn how to do stuff. You can go to a voice acting school and learn how to do stuff, but then you have to figure out, how am I going to apply this, and what do I like to do or not. I'm a coach as well, and one of the things I talk a lot with my clients about is both like the head and the heart. You have your IQ and you have your EQ. So the IQ is like going to film school, like learning how to do it, and then the EQ is figuring out like, well, what do I like and what do I not like, and what do I want to do and I'm passionate about, or I hate and I never want to do. And sometimes we take a job for money because we need to, or sometimes it's a good opportunity, but it's about being conscious and learning, well, I don't want to do it again, or I don't want to pigeonhole myself, or I don't want to cut myself off from that. And that's where that kind of expanding and contracting comes in. Like, am I a generalist? Am I a creative? Am I a filmmaker? Or am I, a sound guy? So it's about kind of learning how to flip those things on or off, or what have you. Now, I did want, especially just having mentioned like IQ and technical stuff, one of the things that was fascinating for me to learn through you was you have a home studio.
Yeah.
And again, on one hand, it's like, oh, you're doing voiceover, so you just need to record your voice. That seems easy, and it is kind of, but again, it's also very complicated.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about how you learned, what you learned, and how you were able to put it together so that you now have this room in the house where you can just record and do whatever gig comes in whenever you need to.
The whole home studio thing wasn't as prominent pre-pandemic, and I really started getting serious and taking classes a few months before it was really a thing, right? It was happening overseas, but when it really hit and there was lockdown and everything, that happened after I started taking classes, and the importance of the home studio became so key. And so the organization that I went through, the company that I went through, they offered classes on how do you set up a home studio. They have classes on how to edit your own audio, how to record and use audio recording and editing software. So that's how I learned, and then a lot of it is just testing it out. And so you kind of have to figure out in your space, in your environment, what may work. I had to think about the type of microphone, because in an apartment space, there's external noise. So I had to use what's called a shotgun mic. That's basically what you use for a boom mic, because it's unidirectional, right? It only picks up sound from one direction, and then it kind of doesn't pick up sound from elsewhere, which in an apartment space is really important. So that, those are things that you learn, and considerations, and, you learn about the different audio interfaces and different things. So once I kind of had that knowledge, I made my attempt at building my studio, and then I sent a recording to a professional audio engineer, a Grammy Emmy award-winning audio engineer who's local and who teaches some of those classes, and he kind of gave me the okay and the go ahead that it was good. And so that's how I knew that I was ready to go. So since we were talking about the home studio, I wanted to give you a tour and how it comes together. So you can see it's fully functioning walk-in closet. We keep our clothes here and everything like that. But then we add some acoustic foam, especially on the ceiling and in the corners. Essentially, you don't want flat reflective surfaces, because that's what the sound bounces off of, and that's what we're trying to prevent. And for the door, I have this curtain. This is actually a moving blanket, just a cheap moving blanket. I placed the grommets myself and just got some cheap shower curtain rings, and that's what covers the door so that doesn't bounce the sound off. I have my music stand where I keep my iPad, where I have my scripts that I go through. This is my microphone. This is my pop filter to help with the plosives, so they're not so sharp or harsh. This is my microphone. And then over here, this would be my laptop where I have my editing software up. I have my headphones so that I can hear myself. And then this is my interface where I control the gain, which is how loud it's coming in, and different things. And my microphone is plugged into that. The software gets plugged into that, and it all kind of works together. So actually a very simple setup. There's not a lot to it. If it sounds good, it is good. And that's kind of the rule. So, you know, you don't have to worry about it looking a certain way. It just really has to function for sound. And you can hear the difference in the part of the interview we did out there in the dining room where it's all these, you know, open spaces and bouncy walls. But this has been sound treated, so you can really hear the difference.
Hey everyone, sorry to stop the show, but we have to pay some bills around here. And to do that, I wanted to point out a couple things I have on offer at my site, shaneborza.com. If you scroll down to my courses, you can see I have both a content creator live class and a DIY version. These teach you everything you need to know from a production standpoint so you can either get a writing project done, an audio project, or a film project. Doesn't matter, it works for everyone. If you scroll down, you can see some of my clients and some of the testimonials people have left telling you how helpful this has been for them. So I hope you check that out. You can also go to my shop and you can see all that I have on offer, to include coaching programs, audio stuff like soundtracks, film production stuff. I have filmmaker bundles, all types of things you might need to help you get your art out into the world. As you can see, I also have a number of books. They are all on Apple Books. So you can go to my site and get them directly, or you can go to Apple Books, put my name in, and then you can see all the books there. They are easily downloadable and you can read them on an iPad or something like that. There are coaching books here. There are poetry and photo books here. And I'm very excited. I just updated my Film Notes workbook and Film Notes book. They are expanded and updated 2023 editions. So please check those out if you want some extra stuff to help teach you production. And now back to the show. So now that you had the studio, we were living somewhere else.
Yes.
And then we moved, and then you had to build out a studio again.
Yeah.
And the good bad thing about those opportunities of like upgrading to a new computer or getting a new camera is you have to kind of figure out like, well, how do I use the new one? How is it different than the old one? But it also gives you the opportunity to improve and make things better, you know, go faster, have things be easier, whatever it might be. So what, if any, differences do you have now than you had before?
Actually, I think that wasn't too different a transition because I was in our walk-in closet and I'm still in our new walk-in closet. The sizes were a little bit different, but you know, I took the acoustic foam that I had from the old studio and brought it over. And the reason actually walk-in closets work great for a home studio is because your clothes help with the sound treatment already. And then you kind of add acoustic foam for supplemental, and then you kind of, you know, you have your equipment, your microphone, your XLR cable, your interface, and then your recording software is just on your laptop. So actually, in my case, I think it was relatively easy. But if we were to move to a space where the walk-in closet was not ideal, you know, I'd probably have to figure something out, like a freestanding recording space, or even, you know, they sell prefabricated booths, which are, you know, very expensive. But you know, once you get to a certain point, that's probably the way that most people go.
Want to shift gears and talk a little bit about the content creation. I know earlier you said you had fallen into it, and you did talk peripherally about liking puzzles sometimes. So A, can you highlight that so maybe people can see some of what your work is, but B, talk a little bit about how people are starting to reach out to you and what kind of work you're doing there, especially through that like puzzle lens, so to speak.
I got really heavily into jigsaw puzzles in 2022. I mean, I've always liked them growing up. I like solving things. So even like riddles, escape rooms, all of that. Crosswords, I love solving things. So, but in 2022, I had an injury, and so I wasn't able to be as active and do a lot of the things that I used to do. And so I was trying to find ways to keep myself entertained, and a local library rents, they let people borrow puzzles. So I started doing that, and I got very, very hooked. And I started, hunting down puzzles in thrift stores, and then I found a local group that swaps with each other, and so I started swapping with people, and it very quickly grew into quite an obsession. And so because I was doing all these puzzles and I wanted to take all these pictures of them, but I didn't want to annoy my friends, I set up a separate Instagram account. It's joyce.puzzles on Instagram, and I just started posting there. And it's an incredible community. It's just a lovely group of people, very supportive, and I was just kind of experimenting. I was having fun. I was starting to pay more attention to how I was taking pictures, like how I was composing them and the lighting and all of that. And I started making videos. Like, I had these ideas for comedic sketches, and so I just started making them and editing them. And I quickly found that I actually really enjoyed it. I mean, I don't ever post on my personal social media, and I never thought of myself ever as being that person or like an influencer or whatever. It all kind of was very unexpected. And I think just because I was doing all these things and trying to make good content, like nice pictures and fun, entertaining videos and things like that, I started having companies reach out to me and being like, hey, can we send you a puzzle if you'll just post about it? And then I had a couple of companies hire me to make videos, like advertisements and things like that. So yeah, I've actually had some really great opportunities, and a lot of it is just, I was just having fun because I wasn't trying to, build a following or like be an influencer or anything. I was just kind of doing the things that I thought were fun and interesting, and like that made me giggle and have a great time and, be all giddy. And I think because of that, there's a lot there that's just very authentic and me just being my weird, silly self. And I think that's probably what stood out and maybe connected with certain people. And so, yeah, I've just kind of continued to do that. And I think that's why it worked, is because it is just very much like genuinely what I like to do and what I want to do.
Again, the through line there is, as you mentioned, wearing multiple hats and being kind of creative in general, being a storyteller in general, is when you are creating your own content, as you mentioned earlier, especially in the indie world, you are kind of doing all the roles, is you're writing, directing, producing, shooting, editing, all of your own stuff.
Yeah.
So again, it's about learning from each project so that you can say, oh, it maybe sometimes only in retrospect, like, oh, now that I look back, I realize like I know how to do this and this and this and this. So, well, what if we bought some lights and tripods and lenses and things, and then I started making stuff. And again, it's been really exciting for me to just watch you be like, or have you come into the other room and be like, don't come out here, I'm shooting. So turning our space into like, oh, this is a production studio now. Mm-hmm. Or, oh, the closet is now a recording studio now, or what have you. Now, just so people understand the context, you've had a couple things go pretty viral, like 100,000 plus views on certain reels and things like that. So again, some of this is about just figuring your personal self out so you can have that like genuine connection. People can tell like you're being very authentic, that you're finding, at least for me on the outside, seeing the parallel between like, oh, I'm in this kind of thriving, open, welcoming voiceover community, and in this thriving, welcoming kind of puzzle community. And again, there's overlaps there beyond just the overlaps like in your skill sets or something. Yeah. So what are you finding as you're going through this kind of journey as a creative or as a storyteller? Are you finding these things are all weaving together and overlapping? Are you finding these are very separate parts of you? Like, how are you moving forward with all of this?
I think it all kind of comes from the same core place of just wanting to play and have fun and, have an idea and then execute it and figure out how to execute it. Because I don't always know. And I've had moments even, creating some of that stuff, especially when I was hired to do it. There's this extra pressure. And so there were a lot of moments where I felt like, I'm a fraud and they're gonna figure it out. I'm like, panicking over it. And you just have to work through it. And like I said, I like to solve things. And so part of that is like, okay, well, there's a solution. Let's figure out how to get there. So yeah, just kind of pushing through that. But yeah, I mean, I think I really like being the one that's kind of creating my own content, my own story. I definitely like to jump in and work on other people's stuff, but I think I don't really see myself being just, for example, just an actor, just a voice actor, and that's it. I want to be able to write. I want to be able to, make decisions about editing and make decisions about, design and things like that. Because I like all of it. I feel like, again, it's all just telling the story, and all of that comes into that. So, yeah, I think I like being able to execute an idea or vision that I have.
With a show called Film Notes, I can't help but ask, what are some of your notes? Maybe they're not about making films, but about creativity in general, and referencing maybe any or all of the things we've just talked about. So starting off with, what are your notes for people who may want to know lessons learned, valuable things you wish you'd known earlier when you were getting started? What are some of your notes for other people who might want to be creative, whether it's voiceover or otherwise?
I think the biggest thing that I wish I knew earlier is how powerful it is to just be yourself. And it sounds so cliche, but you hear this all the time from successful artists. And you think about the people who are the most kind of iconic and influential, and they're all just so unique. And at the time, they received lots of criticism. People thought they were weird or, offensive or whatever. And I think people get so caught up in like, okay, what does the audience want? And how do I cater towards the audience? Or how do I kind of capture this market or whatnot? But I think the people that really stand out are authentic, and people feel that, people know that. And that took me a really, really long time. And, sometimes you just don't know, right? Like I'll make things and I think it's the greatest thing in the world, and like crickets. And then I'll make something that like I hardly put any effort, and it's just, and then like it goes bananas, right? And so you just never know. And so I think for your own soul and the sustainability of being able to continue to create, what do you like? What's interesting to you? What's funny to you? How would you want to tell this story? And that's something that I really wish that I knew earlier. Because again, I think that is actually what has been bringing me opportunities. Again, I'm just making this silly little, Instagram account, doing my silly little sketches and things like that. Like I had no idea who was watching or whatnot. And then someone came to me and pitched an opportunity like, hey, would you be interested in hosting this like web series? It's still being pitched. It's still in kind of the early phases, but the fact that I was considered for that was a surprise. I wasn't necessarily going for that, but I think because I was just doing the things that I thought were funny or entertaining or fun for me, I think that's kind of what attracted that. My voiceover site, it's joyceyoo.com, JOYCEYOO. I really leaned into a specific voice. Like I'm most interested in doing comedic scripts, things that are fun. And so I leaned into that on my site. I mean, one of my photos on my About Me page is this ridiculous, like, throwback to like the glamour shots of the 80s. Like I got my hair done all big and the makeup, and like I'm wearing this ridiculous feather boa and making a funny face. And, the way that I wrote the copy, I wrote all of it, and it's in a very distinct, specific voice. And the thing is that has attracted certain people to want to work with me on certain projects. But at the same time, it hasn't limited me. And I think that's what people get afraid of, is like, if I lean too hard into one thing, I'm going to miss out on other opportunities. But actually, when people like working with you, they're kind of like, hey, do you also do this? Right? And so I've actually gotten other opportunities that are not at all funny. Like I'll do long scripts about accounting, right? And it's not that exciting, but it pays, right? And that's not what anyone would consider me for, I don't think, just based on my website.
So let's switch to the other half of those notes. What are some notes you have for people that might want to work with either you in particular or someone who does what you do? Like, what do they need to know? Where do they go to find a voiceover actor or a content creator? How do they know what to do ahead of time so that when they talk to you, they have the information you need so that you know what they're looking for or what the gig is or what have you? If no one's worked with someone who does what you do, what would you tell them as some notes?
So I guess if you're someone who's looking for a voice actor, there are certain online marketplaces like voices.com, voices123.com are the large ones. There's some others. But you can go and find performers and listen to their reels. You can invite them to submit auditions. But you have to provide some specs, right? Ideally, some sense of what the script is, or maybe a partial script. What you're looking for in terms of the tone or personality or style. Basic things like, are you okay with them submitting from a home studio? Do you want it to be a live session where you're on and you're able to kind of direct or coach them? And those online marketplaces make it relatively easy because you have to fill out certain, fields to provide that information and whatnot. So that's one of the ways to find talent. There are some rosters, especially if you're looking for, say, diverse talent. There's something called the PGM-BO list. PGM stands for People of Global Majority. Essentially, it's people of color. There is a list specifically for queer, LGBTQIA+ performers. So sometimes you can just find rosters and lists out there depending on what type of talent you're looking for. You can just do a search for, voice actor or whatnot. Again, my voiceover website is joyceyoo.com. So if you're interested in working with me, that's there. And again, just have some specs about your project. What is it? Is it an audiobook? Is it a podcast? What's the character or whatnot, even if it's narrator. So I would say kind of on a basic sense, that's what you want to come with. Maybe do some research on the rates. I mean, usually you can ask the voice actor what their rates are, and depending on the genre, it's going to vary. Some it's per word, some it's, not often, but occasionally it might be per page, or it might be kind of a set fee for a recording session, especially if you're going to do it as a live directed session, things like that. So a few of those things to know. In terms of, I guess, content creation, I mean, go on social media, find stuff, follow accounts that you like. Is there somebody whose stuff you like? Nowadays, it seems like the most kind of desirable or effective is letting talent be them. And so it's finding the match for your whatever you're trying to promote. So think about that, right? I think it's up to you to figure out, could this work with my product or service or whatever, if you just kind of let that person be them and have a say in what they come up with. And of course you're going to have discussions with each other about what is okay and what is not. But a lot of people that I work with that I'm kind of creating content for either regularly or on a project basis, a lot of it is just, hey, no like swearing, no offensive things, but whatever you want. Like, here's some ideas, but do what you want. And so especially I think for social content creation, that's sort of the approach to take. It's just, have your guidelines, but then it's like finding the people who you think match with what you're trying to do.
Now let's shift into kind of pre-wrap up and say, what are some things you're working on now or things that are coming up, and or some work that you might want to have people check out?
Well, so current work you can find at joyce.puzzles on Instagram, and joyceyoo.com is my voiceover website. I am wanting to start a YouTube channel for my puzzling. So that's probably something I'm going to focus on in the coming year. I think those are kind of immediately on the horizon. I just want to keep, pursuing more voiceover work, more e-learning, because that's kind of my bread and butter, but also more, character-driven stuff, which I think should be really fun. I'd like to write some scripts. Those are a couple of things I have on the horizon.
Now, as a final ask, you mentioned your website and your Instagram. Where would you send people to connect to you, follow you, or reach out to you? Is there anything other than those that you want to highlight, or are those the best avenues?
Those are probably the best. That's where I'm actually active. Like, I have other accounts, but I'm not really active there. But if you message me through the website or you message me on Instagram, chances are you'll get a response from me.
Well, thanks so much for sitting down with me. And for all of you, there's going to be a big announcement on the next episode. So as a reminder, this comes out every month, the first Monday of each month. So look for the big news in February. And this is the 3rd season. So if you're just joining us now, go back and check out some of the old episodes. You're going to have all kinds of people across the industry: producers, writers, editors, actors, makeup effects people, and all that. And we do have a lot of exciting guests coming up this year as well. So I'll look forward to seeing you there. And one last thing, if these are the podcast episodes you're listening to and you're not watching this, go to YouTube and watch the show so you can see people's work. If you're watching the show and you can't miss, you don't want to miss one, but you're away, listen to the podcast. So it's a double dip. You get a chance to either listen, watch, whichever is easier for you. So all that said, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for being here.
And we'll see you all on the next episode. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support the show, please click on the link below. You can also contact me at my website if you have any questions about filmmaking or anything else. Off to the side, you'll see a couple of my books, Film Notes and the Film Notes Workbook. I encourage you to check those out if you'd like to learn more about filmmaking. See you in the next episode.
Scene 1, Apple, take 1.